Here is what the history books won't tell you. Jack Johnson, the first black heavyweight champion of the world, didn't leave New York quietly in 1932. Before he got on that train, he sat down with a young man named Bumpy Johnson. No cameras, no reporters, just two men from the South who had both refused to bow. What Jack said in that conversation was so powerful that Bumpy repeated it, word for word, a night he faced down Lucky Luciano, the night he walked into the Cotton Club alone, the night his own bodyguard pulled a trigger at point-blank range. 3 sentences, 3 decades. This is that story. July 4th, 1910, Reno, Nevada. The sun was brutal that afternoon, 104 degrees, no shade, 22,000 people packed into a wooden arena that smelled like dust, sweat, and anticipation. White America had shown up with one purpose: to watch the great white hope, former heavyweight champion Jim Jeffries, come out of retirement and put things back in order. To prove in front of the whole country that a black man could not stand at the top of the world. They had done everything right. They'd picked the biggest, strongest white fighter they could find. They'd given him 18 months to train. The newspapers, and there were dozens of them coast to coast, had printed cartoon after cartoon of Jeffries crushing Johnson under his boot. The fix, everyone assumed, was as good as in. Jack Johnson didn't read the newspapers. What happened over the next 15 rounds was not a boxing match. It was a lesson. Round after round, Jack Johnson, elegant, controlled, almost bored-looking behind that enormous grin, dismantled the great white hope piece by piece. He talked to Jeffries between punches. He talked to the crowd. He laughed. In round 15, he put Jeffries on the canvas for the first time in his career. Then he did it again. Then the fight was stopped. Jack Johnson raised his fists to the sky. He had won the championship 2 years earlier in Australia on December 26, 1908, the night he knocked out Tommy Burns and became the first black heavyweight champion of the world. Tonight, in Reno, he proved it was no accident. He proved it couldn't be taken back. The riots started within hours. White mobs poured into black neighborhoods in cities from New York to New Orleans, from Chicago to Atlanta. They burned homes, they beat men in the streets, they lynched. By the time the violence was over, at least 26 black Americans were dead. Some say more, because nobody was counting carefully enough. The crime? Celebrating, being happy, daring to cheer for a man who had just proven that black excellence was real and unstoppable. Down in Charleston, South Carolina, a 4-year-old boy named Ellsworth Johnson heard the story of that fight for the first time from his father. Not the official story, the real one. The story of a black man who walked into the belly of white America's hatred, smiled in its face, and knocked it down. That boy would grow up to become Bumpy Johnson, and he never forgot what he heard that day. Fast forward to 1919, Bumpy Johnson is 13 years old, and he's on a train heading north. The Great Migration is in full swing, hundreds of thousands of black Americans pouring out of the South, out of the Jim Crow laws, out of the sharecropper poverty, out of the constant ambient terror of living somewhere that could turn on you at any moment, for any reason or no reason at all. They're heading to Chicago, to Detroit, to Philadelphia, to the city that glitters at the top of every dream, New York. Harlem in 1919 is unlike anything Bumpy has ever seen. Lenox Avenue on a Saturday night, Duke Ellington's piano drifting out of an open window on 133rd Street, women in silk dresses, men in pressed suits, the smell of frying chicken and jazz and possibility all mixed together in the thick summer air. Langston Hughes is writing poems 3 blocks away. Marcus Garvey is preaching black nationalism to thousands in the park. Madam C.J. Walker, the first black female self-made millionaire, has her salon just down the street. But underneath the music and the silk and the poetry, Harlem has another face. Poverty so sharp it cuts. Landlords, almost all of them white, charging 3 times what they charge downtown for apartments that are half the size and twice as cold in winter. Cops who consider Harlem a hunting ground rather than a community they're meant to protect. And the numbers racket, the illegal lottery that runs through every street, every barber shop, every corner, controlled more and more by white organized crime from downtown. Young Bumpy Johnson watches all of this. He reads everything he can get his hands on: Shakespeare, philosophy, newspapers, history. He's an unusually quiet for a young man with unusually quick fists. He has a way of sitting in a room and studying it, cataloging it, understanding it completely before he decides how to move through it. But by 1932, the studying is about to get an unexpected teacher. September 1932, New York City. Jack Johnson is 54 years old, and America has spent 20 years trying to destroy him. After winning the championship in 1908, the United States government came for him with everything it had. They dug up the Mann Act, a law against transporting women across state lines for immoral purposes, and used it as a weapon. The charges were transparently motivated by race. Everyone knew it. Johnson knew it. But the jury was all white, the judge was all white, and the verdict was predetermined. Johnson fled to Europe rather than go to prison. He fought exhibition matches in Paris, in London, in Buenos Aires. He ran nightclubs. He drove race cars. He spent 7 years in exile from his own country, a man whose only crime was winning too publicly and refusing to perform gratitude for being allowed to exist. He eventually came back, served his time, and by 1932 is living in New York, diminished in the eyes of the law, but not in the eyes of Harlem. Because Harlem knows the truth about Jack Johnson. Harlem knows what they took from him and why, and Harlem still stands when he walks down the street. It's a Tuesday evening in late September when Jack Johnson walks into Small's Paradise on 7th Avenue. The moment he steps through the door, everything changes. Not dramatically. There are no gasps, no sudden silence like in the movies. It's more like a pressure shift, like the whole room inhales at the same time and holds it. Conversation slow, heads turn. Men who've been arguing about baseball scores stop mid-sentence and just look. Because Jack Johnson doesn't walk into a room, he arrives in one. 54 years old, still carrying himself like the heavyweight champion of the world, wearing a 3-piece suit the color of midnight, a gold watch chain catching the light as he moves. At the bar, a 26-year-old Bumpy Johnson sets down his glass. He has been waiting for this moment since he was 4 years old. Bumpy is not nobody at this point. He's been working the streets of Harlem for nearly a decade, first as muscle for Madame Stephanie St. Clair, the Caribbean-born queen of the numbers, and now increasingly as a power in his own right. He's known in the neighborhood as someone different from the usual street operators. He pays rent for families who can't make it. He reads Dostoevsky in the back of jazz clubs. He settles disputes with words more often than violence, and when violence comes, it comes with surgical precision rather than chaos. But he is also at a crossroads. Dutch Schultz, the German Jewish mobster from the Bronx, is pushing hard into Harlem's numbers racket. The Italian families downtown are watching. The pressure is coming from every direction, and Bumpy is smart enough to know that street toughness alone will not be enough. He needs something else, a framework, a code that can withstand the kind of systematic assault that comes when the entire white power structure, the mob, the police, the courts, decides it wants what you have. He doesn't know yet that the answer is about to walk through the door of Small's Paradise and order a bourbon.
The conversation doesn't happen right away. Johnson, Jack, knows how to read a room. He spent his whole life in rooms that wanted to diminish him, and he's developed a kind of radar for who in any given space is genuine and who is performing. He orders his drink. He talks to a few people. He watches. And he watches Bumpy. He watches the way the young man at the bar moves, not fidgeting, not performing cool, just genuinely still in a way that most men his age can't manage. He watches the way the other men in the bar orient themselves toward Bumpy without realizing they're doing it. The way conversations near him get quieter, more careful, more considered. He's seen that quality before. He's felt it himself. The thing that people mistake for intimidation, but is actually something rarer, authority. Around midnight, Jack Johnson takes his drink and walks to the bar. He sits down next to Bumpy Johnson. For a full minute, neither man speaks. Then Jack says, without looking up from his glass, "You're the one they call Bumpy." It's not a question. Bumpy says, "And you're the one they call champion." Jack almost smiles. Former champion. Bumpy doesn't hesitate. Not in this neighborhood. And that single sentence is what cracks open the door. Because Jack Johnson has spent 20 years being told what he used to be, what was taken from him, what he no longer has. And this young man in Harlem has just looked at him and seen exactly what he still is. Not a cautionary tale, not a symbol of defeat, a king between kingdoms. They move to a back table. The bartender knows not to disturb them. They talk for 3 hours. What Bumpy learns at that table will take years to fully understand. Jack Johnson has seen everything. He fought his way to the top of a world that was designed to keep him out, and then watched that world use every tool available, the government, the courts, the media, the mob, to take it back. He knows the mechanics of institutional power better than most law professors. He knows exactly how the system identifies threats and neutralizes them. He knows because he was the threat. He tells Bumpy about the years in Europe, about learning to operate without the protections, however thin and unreliable, that being on home soil provides. About the fights in countries where he didn't speak the language and didn't know the rules and won anyway, because the fundamentals don't change. He tells him about the Mann Act prosecution, about the way they waited until they had something, anything, and then used it not as law, but as a message. You got too visible. You made too much noise. You won in front of too many people and didn't perform enough shame afterward. Bumpy listens to all of this very carefully. Then he asks the question he's been building toward all night. How do you build something that they can't take back? Jack Johnson looks at him for a long moment. He picks up his glass, sets it down, and then he says the 3 sentences that Bumpy Johnson will carry for the rest of his life. You don't build for them to take. You build so deep in the people that the people become the walls. When they come for you, and they always come, they have to come through everyone who needed you first. Bumpy doesn't write it down. He doesn't need to. It lands somewhere deeper than memory. Understand what Jack Johnson is telling him. He's not talking about protection rackets or street muscle or building a criminal empire, though all of those things are present in Harlem's reality. He's talking about something more fundamental, the difference between power that is yours and power that is borrowed. Dutch Schultz has power. The Italian families have power. The corrupt police commissioners have power. But all of that power sits on top of the community like a boot on a neck. It requires constant pressure to maintain. The moment the pressure eases, the community breathes. The moment the community organizes, the boot slips. That kind of power is ultimately fragile because it depends entirely on the powerlessness of the people beneath it. What Jack Johnson is describing is different. He's describing the power of being genuinely needed, of being the person who pays the rent when the landlord is at the door, of being the person who makes the call that stops the police from harassing the barber shop on 125th Street, of being so woven into the fabric of a community that removing you doesn't just eliminate a threat, it tears a hole in something essential. That kind of power can't be arrested away. It can't be exiled away. Even in prison, even in exile, it persists because it lives in the people, not in the position. Bumpy Johnson already understood this instinctively. It's why he'd been paying rent and making calls and being different from the usual street operators. But Jack Johnson just gave him the architecture, the conscious, deliberate framework for what had been mostly instinct. That night, walking home through Harlem's streets past midnight, Bumpy Johnson becomes a different kind of player. Here is what changes in the months that follow. Where before Bumpy was building loyalty, people who would work for him, people who would protect him, now he is building something deeper, community infrastructure. When families in his neighborhood can't make rent, it's not a random act of generosity, it's a deliberate investment. When he intervenes with a corrupt cop who's been shaking down a black-owned business, it's not just fixing a problem, it's making himself necessary to the ecosystem. He pays for school supplies, he funds church repairs, he settles disputes between neighbors that have nothing to do with the criminal world, property lines, family disagreements, debts between friends that have soured into enemies. He does this not because he's a saint, he does this because Jack Johnson told him the truth. The people are the walls. And Harlem responds. Not with blind loyalty. Harlem is too wise for that, too scarred by too many men who promised protection and delivered exploitation, but with something more valuable, genuine trust, the kind that can't be bought because it was earned in the specific currency of showing up when it mattered. Dutch Schultz feels this in 1933 when he sends 12 men to deal with Bumpy Johnson and only one walks out. He feels it not just because Bumpy is dangerous, he knew Bumpy was dangerous. He feels it because every person in Harlem he tries to use as an informant, as a lever, as a source of pressure, they won't move. They absorb the pressure and send it back. Because Bumpy Johnson has built himself so deep in the people that coming for him means coming through all of them. And Schultz, who has broken harder men than this, pulls back. He tells his people, I don't understand this man. He operates by different rules. He's right. The rules came from Jack Johnson on a September night in 1932. Jack Johnson died on June 10, 1946. He was 68 years old. He died in a car accident in North Carolina, driving too fast on a road he knew well, leaving a diner that had refused to serve him because of his race. Even at the end, America couldn't let him eat in peace. His boxing record stood at 73 wins, 13 losses, 9 draws. He held the heavyweight championship for 7 years. He survived 2 governments, 3 continents, and a federal prosecution designed specifically to destroy him. And on a September night in 1932, in the back of a bar in Harlem, he passed something forward. Bumpy Johnson lived for another 22 years after Jack's death. He died on July 7, 1968, not from a bullet, not in prison, but from a heart attack in the Ledex Lounge at his usual table, mid-conversation with friends. He was 62 years old. He never wrote a memoir. He never gave a long interview. The code he lived by, the 3 sentences Jack gave him, he never quoted publicly. He just lived them, so consistently and completely that Harlem didn't need a quote. They could see it every day, in every family he helped keep housed, every business he helped keep open, every young man he redirected from a path that would have ended badly. 2 men from the South, both refused to bow. One passed the torch, the other carried it for 36 years. That's not a gangster story. That's a story about what it means to build something real in a world designed to take everything from you. About the difference between power that sits on top of people and power that grows from inside them. About the specific genius of understanding that when they come for you, and they always come, the only thing that can stop them is having made yourself so necessary to the people that coming for you means coming through all of them. Jack Johnson figured that out in exile. Bumpy Johnson built it in Harlem. And Harlem remembered both of them. If this story hit you, if you feel like you just learned something history tried to bury, hit that like button right now. It takes 2 seconds and it helps this channel keep telling the stories that textbooks skip. Subscribe if you want more. We're dropping Bumpy Johnson stories every week. The ones that didn't make it into the movies, the ones the history books skipped, the ones that actually happened in those streets. Drop a comment. What was the most powerful thing Jack Johnson told Bumpy? Do you think Bumpy becomes who he was without that conversation? Remember, power isn't what they give you, it's what they can't take back.